Another common usage for parallel compression is on drums, okay? And this is a technique used to absolutely smash a sound to bring out every little bit of the roominess, the energy, and just bring an overall excitement to the performance. So let's just play these multi-track drums without any parallel processing so you can hear where we're at. Okay, so they sound nice, but they sound very controlled and they feel like they're being sat back on a little bit. Even though the drummer's hitting quite hard, I don't really feel like they're just being absolutely pounded. And that's one thing that you can bring out, because remember, when you see a drummer perform live and you're in the same space, you can literally see how hard they're hitting it. And, you know, in my opinion, it takes an extra 20% in a recording to just get that energy. And sometimes the drummer might not be able to physically hit the drums that hard, and at other times, you know, the room isn't in a good enough shape and doesn't sound good enough to facilitate hitting the drums that hard. Okay, so a good way to get around this is to use parallel compression. Okay, so I'm going to create this on the snare first of all. So I'm going to create a new stereo aux, and I'll call this para. Okay, so, and I usually find it best to send these into the same buses. So I'm going to send that into the drums bus. Okay, so now I've got a parallel channel ready to go, and again, I'm just going to use the stock Pro Tools compressor. And as we get further into the course, we're going to be delving into classic compressors, and I'll be discussing the best types for parallel compression and things like that later on. But the important thing now is to be listening and hearing what this is achieving, not necessarily the brand and model of compressor that's doing it. So I'm going to pick something that's going to a preset that's going to annihilate stuff. So snare annihilator, let's start with that. Okay, and let's just listen to the snare in solo going to the parallel. And let's send it pre. Okay, so the actual snare itself has lots of low. It's almost been tuned to the point where the lugs are loose. So I'm going to put it on the sample instead and see if that just gets a more aggressive sound. Yeah, so that gets a much more aggressive sound, but I think that we can do more with it. So let's put that same lo-fi distortion on. And let's see what that's like with the original. So that feels like it's got a lot more energy. It's got louder as well, but there's an upper mid thing that's bothering me, so I'm just going to get rid of a bit of that. Okay, so that's got a lot more energy. Now let's try feeding a little bit of the kick into that. I might do that again with a sample. Let's see what that sounds like. Okay, so hopefully what you're hearing there is that the whole performance has a lot more energy. And also, one thing that I find that parallel compression does really well is it kind of almost polyfills all of the cracks in. Any little frequency gap, anything that was kind of missing or hollow or thin seems to have been filled in, and it kind of solidifies the whole performance. So let me just take this in and out again and listen from the perspective of how the frequency content seems to have evened out as well. Okay, and you've got to be careful, but sometimes you can get away with putting a little bit of the overheads in there as well. So having too many cymbals in the parallel can sometimes make it all just sound a bit aggressive, end up with loads of whistles and rings, and just overall some fatiguing sounds entering into the parallel compressor. But just a controlled amount can help, gel and glue everything together. So let's just listen one more time. Okay, so that's done a really good job of bringing the sustain and the life of the drums much further forward. But that doesn't mean that you only need or can only use one parallel compressor. So this one, for instance, is got a very, very quick attack time and quite a quick release. Well, we can do a similar type of method as when we were using serial compression. We can use this one here to elongate the perceived sustain and the detail of the sound because it's cutting down the transient a lot. And we can do another one that has a slower attack time that's going to exaggerate the punch and kind of blend those two things together. So I'm going to rename this one and I'll call this drum sustain. Rename it here. And now let's do another one that's there for drum punch. So while I'm auditioning this, I'm going to turn the other one off. And the idea here is we're picking something that's going to exaggerate the tick and the front end of the drum sounds. And this is particularly good, again, on kicks and snares. I'm just going to set this from scratch. So I'm just going to listen to the close mic on the snare and set it that way. Okay, so that seems to be a good job of bringing the tick out of the front of it. And this might sound unnatural on its own, but when we put everything together, it is likely to just really make you able to fine tune the way that the drums sit in two easy parallel faders now that we've got a nice sounding overall blend. So let's just try putting that on this kick sample as well and seeing what that sounds like. Okay, and in this case I don't really need to bring anything out of the cymbals with this, so I'm going to turn both these parallels down, and I'm going to listen to the front edge, and I'm going to bring that up and listen to the transient, and when I feel like I've got enough of that, I'm going to then pull it back down a little bit and then do the same with the sustain. So I feel like we could do more with the kick and less with the snare. And now let's bring up the sustain. And let's send some of the sustain into the kick sample as well. And now let's listen to a little bit of an extended section, and I'm going to turn on and off that extra processing. Okay, so there you have it. That's some parallel compression on drums. And in the next section, I'm going to be showing you a couple of techniques to use with more harmonic or sustained instruments.